This is Hunt Nebraska, the official podcast for insight into Nebraska's hunting and shooting sports community. Be sure to give us a follow on Facebook, our space for sharing stories, information, tips, and techniques. Now, Hunt Nebraska. And welcome back into the Hunt Nebraska, everybody. We got a fun one for you today. We're going to talk a little ducks here in the cabin, but as you can see, we've got the Rachel Carlson, our shooting range, shooting sports coordinator, sitting behind mission control here, pushing the buttons, making us sound good. You've got me, Hershy, in studio, as well as we've got John McKinney joining us here at the cabin. How you doing today, John?
Doing good. Thanks for having me back here. It's good to be here.
Well, yeah, we appreciate you being here. John is the Nebraska Waterfowl Program Manager. Did I say that right?
You did.
Oh,
yep,
good.
Mouthful.
Good. And you've been in that position for a couple of years now?
It'll be 2 years here in about a couple weeks, I think. So.
Oh,
yep.
All right. So this is kind of like the anniversary podcast.
Yeah, close to it.
For you right there. Well, we got all sorts of questions that have to do with waterfowl because, folks, as we're recording this, we finally have had a little bit more seasonal weather. That feels a little bit more like
a little
fall.
bit, yeah.
We're getting some wind right now. I don't think it's from the correct direction. I think it's blowing all the birds that are trying to fly today back north. But things will happen, and we've got the calendar ducks that just feel that urge. We'll get that cold weather sooner or later to help push some things down from the states and areas north of us. So duck hunting is almost a religion in the state. Is that the best way to describe it?
Yeah, it is. It's really unique part of our heritage and culture here in the state of Nebraska, particularly along the Platte River and some other areas along the state. But it's super awesome to be a part of and interact with fellow waterfowl hunters here. It
is. And one time I do believe, Rachel, I was talking about duck hunting here in Nebraska at some presentation, and I made mention of it almost being religion-like, except for the regulars, they show up more than just on the holidays. They do. They're there whenever they can make it. So we've got some cool things going on here. One of the things, though, I just saw this list sitting here last.
Oh, is that
remember
from
last time?
Last
yeah.
time?
We were playing Would You Rather, John. Have you ever played that game where you're given two options and you have to pick between the two?
I have, yeah. I've played some versions of that.
All right, so we have the hunting version here at Hunt Nebraska. And one of them that popped up, I don't think we got to ask this one.
Okay.
But so we saved this one just for you by accident. But just for you, we marked this one. Would you rather, John McKinney, shoot one banded duck or a limit of ducks with no bands?
I'm going to go with the one-banded duck.
With the one-banded duck.
I'm a little bit different, I guess, when I'm waterfowl hunting. I just enjoy being out in the wetland and seeing ducks and, whoever you're going with, socializing there, working with a dog. And so, if I go out hunting and don't get a limit, it's not the end of the day for me. So,
okay. All right. Yeah. So you might go with that regardless. But having that band puts it over the edge for sure. Yeah,
I don't have a banded duck yet, so that's on the list.
This is where I made a big mistake. So my uncle Mike is the one that took me out duck hunting. First time ever. It's early season. It was not a teal season, but it opened in early October just for a couple of days. And we were out along the old Iowa River in the state east of here, and second flock of birds that came in, wood ducks. And I dropped a hen wood duck and walked over and had a little metal band on the bottom.
Nice. Yeah.
And my uncle was just like, "Oh, that is so cool. Oh, that is so neat. Can I have it?" And my first thought is, well, yeah, this is like the second duck I've ever shot. So every other duck's banded all. And in that year, we could only shoot 3 ducks, but I figured I'll go duck hunting some more. So if it's every other duck, I've got a good chance of getting another one. I went probably another 7-8 years before I saw another one that was banded. So I didn't realize how rare it could be in some cases. Here in Nebraska, we get a few ducks probably harvested every year with bands, but I'm guessing more geese.
Yeah, we get a lot of Canada geese. We band Canada geese across the state. And so a lot of our resident Canada geese that we ban get shot here within the state. We ban around 2,000 every year. And so all the way from Omaha out to Scotts Bluff. And so we get a lot of returns from our Canada geese. But then we do band some ducks in the sandhills.
Okay.
And then we get a fair amount of mallard recoveries in and around the Platte River or some of our larger lakes later in the season.
Now, for some listeners that might not be duck or goose hunters, they're thinking, band, what are you talking about?
Yeah, so it's an aluminum band we put on waterfowl, and so it started back early in the 1900s. Some researchers put bands on waterfowl and to try to see kind of if we could figure out where they were going. And so that's evolved, and we use transmitters and all kinds of stuff now. But bands are still really important because it gives us a harvest rate, so we can keep a close watch on the population to see how many are getting harvested. It helps us with distribution. So we put a band on a bird in, let's say, North Dakota. Does that bird end up in the Gulf Coast of Texas or Louisiana, or kind of where are they going? And it helped over time develop our flyway system, which we manage waterfowl off from today. And so we can get a lot of useful information from bands that we put on birds.
It's pretty cool. I mean, like you said, it kind of starts drawing some lines there and some amazing stories in that. Because if I remember correctly, and you might have to say right or wrong, like you said, a good chunk of our Canada geese that are hatched out here end up spending a lot of time, and those that get banded probably harvested within the Nebraska and maybe the surrounding states. But our ducks, on the other hand, a lot of the ducks that we see harvested here in the state of Nebraska probably come from north.
Yeah, I think most of our mallards come from Saskatchewan, the ones getting harvested here in Nebraska. But obviously we kill some from the Dakotas as well. Then we've been banding some blue wings in the sandhills here over the last several years. And interestingly enough, a lot of them are getting shot on the Gulf Coast of Texas. So they're making it out of Nebraska either prior or during early teal season and making it down to Texas before they're getting shot.
And also kind of cool is sometimes seeing, because you're able to say hatch year, which means they hatch this spring, or I think adult or non-hatch year is the official term. And then all of a sudden you can see, especially in the geese side of things, that they live for many years at times. And you get some that are harvested 5 years after they've been banded, or 6 or beyond.
Yeah, especially for urban geese. Generally it's 10 to 12 years for a Canada goose to live, but yours reports and band recoveries of Canada geese in urban areas of 20-plus years age. So,
wow.
Yeah, they can live a long time depending on their environment and how safe it is where they're at and foraging opportunities. So,
that's pretty awesome. But not just what we're going to be talking about here today. I think we could do a whole show on nothing but bands, because a lot of duck hunters and goose hunters, they take that band off and they wear it around their lanyard or have some type of braided whatever. It kind of becomes jewelry for the hunter. And we get to brag about it and see some of the changes in the bands as well. And be sure, folks, if you do harvest a band, if you're fortunate enough to do that, duck or goose, be sure to report that. I think it's on the
That's what I was going to ask
website.
About. As not a duck hunter, not a waterfowl hunter, how do you report that?
Yeah, there's a website on all the bands. I believe it's reportband.gov. And you can go there and you fill out information about where you harvested at, the time of the year you harvested it, and all that information gets compiled by the USGS and gets shared with states.
Cool.
It is, and it's always fun to see, and now it goes a lot faster. It used to be you had to, in fact, I think wood duck, I think we had to write a letter somewhere. That was pre-internet days, and you just waited there to see and get the little certificate that says, hey, it was banded here by this individual, which was usually the holder of the banding permit, and in this location, just to see where and how and whether it was a hatch year or how old it was. It's always kind of fun.
Yeah, I think now you can get your certificate back within about 5 days.
Oh, that's quick. It's gotta be with the technology we have. But like I said, we're not going to spend a whole time on that, because we got some other things to talk about. And one of the things at first is I want to set the stage here, because like we said, Nebraska as a whole, we've got some diehard duck and goose hunters. We've got some of those that as soon as season opens, they're out there just any chance they can get. They've been planning it. They've been plotting. They've been working on the blind. They've been digging it back in, brushing it up, planting around it in some of the fields for some of the pit blinds and things of that nature, and just excited. But it's also, we're kind of a unique situation, I think. Yep, we're in the middle of the Central Flyway, but we're also a nesting state. Yeah,
we're a mid-latitude state, which means that, we probably feel the effects of seasonal weather more so than some of the other states, because birds are always going to return north to breed, and they're always going to fly south the winter, and we're kind of in the middle there. And so we, if it's warmer a lot later, we may have birds that or mallards at least, it might hold up a little bit before getting to us, and then they might fly right over us or whatnot. So, that's from an aspect of setting seasons or zones, that's a little more difficult too. But also in the sandhills, which a lot of people don't know, is we have the largest kind of believed to be prairie ecosystem for breeding waterfowl outside of the prairie pothole region. So we have ducks that breed in the sandhills. The majority of ducks we see are blue-winged teal and mallards. So we're kind of a mid-latitude state, and we get, migrating waterfowl. But obviously we have breeding waterfowl here as well. So,
and then on top of it, Rachel, we've got spots that are in a given year and just wonderful early season habitat, especially for those early migrating teal. We've got some really shallow spots, really, that muddy edge along some of the streams, rivers, farm ponds, whatever it is, the rainwater basin area, shallow wetlands that just have a smorgasbord of food for those early migrating ducks. And then we also have some wonderful warm water sloughs that don't freeze up. We've got some good river systems and, some big ponds and things. And obviously, resident Canada geese probably add to that attraction as well to the migratory birds, that some of them don't have to migrate any further. They spend all winter here.
Yeah. Yeah. Nebraska is a really unique state. You look at the sandhills, for example, and you have a Loop River system, which runs through the heart of the sandhills, and it can be open until early January. But then you have some of those surrounding shallow lakes, and they might be froze up by Thanksgiving. And so there's a lot of unique habitat across the state. I would say, within the Central Flyway, Nebraska probably has some of the most unique waterfowl hunting habitat. I mean, we have a Platte River, which runs if you include the North Platte, South Platte, runs across our entire state. And it's a really unique river. It's not a deep-bodied water like the Missouri, what you kind of see in our border with Iowa. And you can have waterfowl in certain spots earlier in the season. You can have them holding water or waterfowl, late into the season. It's a really unique river with different portions of it open at different times of the year. So,
well, and just that, we're in the Central Flyway. And right now, like the season that we're in, 24-25, we've got, what do they call it, the liberal framework, because kind of walk us through that again, John, because, we've got a Waterfowl Program Manager, but you've got the unique distinction, unlike some of your coworkers that get to oversee and manage programs for wildlife that don't cross state lines very often, or definitely not international boundaries here in Nebraska, but you do. I mean, you've got birds, like you said, might be up from Saskatchewan that we're going to be hunting here in a little bit. And we've got teal maybe nested here. They're going to be, getting south of the border.
Yeah. Yeah. So with waterfowl, they're managed differently than basically any other species. And so back in the early 1900s, 1918, we had something called the Migratory Bird Treaty Act that came along. And it basically came along, one, to try to stop the overharvest of certain species, but also from the realization of that, what Canada does to waterfowl directly affects the waterfowl that we see in the U.S. and Texas or Mexico or whatever. And so it became an international treaty with Japan, Russia, Canada, the U.S., and Mexico that kind of set some boundaries and frameworks about how waterfowl that can be managed. And so within that came our flyway system. And so we have 4 flyways in the U.S. As you mentioned, we're in the Central Flyway. And so all the waterfowl biologists within the Central Flyway, along with our council members, which is generally a wildlife division director, meet and discuss regulations, new research, and get updates from various partners. And we do that every year in conjunction with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And then we make proposals on regulations based off the data we have. And that's kind of a general framework that all flyways have to abide by.
And then the kind of the formula, you punch in the numbers and all that type of stuff. And you got what, liberal, moderate, and restrictive?
Yeah. So U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service handles all the models. Right now we're in a liberal liberal package. And so we have 74 days for the regular duck season. And it's primarily based off the mallard count, the number of ponds we count in our survey area, and the number of mallards pairs that we count. So.
All right. And yet, One thing we are able to do at this state, folks, and something we'll get into maybe just a little bit here, but we're going to have to bring you back, I think, is we've got zones. We've got zones here to try to allow more opportunity for duck hunting based on kind of whether they have early season ducks or habitat or late season, right?
Yeah, so a zone is just broadly defined as a geographic area that can have independent hunting seasons within a state. And so here in Nebraska, we have 4 zones, which is the maximum number of zones allowed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And the general idea of zones is to match that with habitat types. So, for example, you were talking about early kind of season hunting wetlands. It might freeze up kind of early in a rainwater basin. And so we stick that type of habitat in a zone, and we try to take the earlier season type habitat and stick that all in a similar zone so you can have an earlier hunting season, if you will. While you take habitat types that might be open later, like the Loop River system, which I mentioned, and you put that in a zone and you try to put that late season habitat all in a zone where you can have a later season. And so you kind of match habitat types. You also take into account migration patterns and then hunter preferences. And so we've been rezoning here in Nebraska since 1982, and our zones look quite a bit different than some of our surrounding states. And part of that is, Nebraska, we've had a history of working with hunters and trying to get hunter preference data from them about where they would like to see their zone boundary. And so, if a hunter proposes a pretty large change, then generally, we're just not able to make that due to the number of hunters that it could affect. But generally, if we can, we try to work with our hunters, and if they would like to see a zone boundary tweaked, we try to do that.
And folks, in this year's Small Game and Waterfowl Guide 24-25 edition, you're going to be looking at pages 18 and 19 to get into some of the detail. And it looks like even page 20 has some things on the western side of the state before we get to the dark goose zones. But what you're telling me then is we've got 4 zones, all right? So in zone 4, right there, 74 days of duck hunting.
Yep. Yeah, so all of our zones, our regular duck season, no matter how many zones you have or whatnot, can only have 74 days of duck hunting.
Zone 1, how many days?
Yep, 74.
Zone 3?
Same.
I see a rhythm here.
Yes, there seems to be a pattern.
There does. And folks, again, that's back to the habitat. That's back to, my goodness, hey, more opportunity perhaps in those areas, but we want to give you the maximum number of days.
Yep.
We don't want to short you by, like you said, sitting out there. Now, it can happen. It's Nebraska, right? But we're trying to gamble a little bit more, hedge our bets, saying small water. We don't want any sitting out here when migration's on, season's closed, because we're managing for that late season habitat. And then once season rolls in, yours freezes up fast. Just like we want try to that late season habitat, knowing that it's only going to get better and better, not having them burn up days or on the front end and lose it. So 74. So maximum opportunity.
Yep. Yeah, we only get 74 days. And I think what we're going to get into in a minute is kind of what's upcoming with zones. But, we have a season date setting process and we have a rezoning process, and those are 2 distinct things.
Okay.
But we can touch on that in a bit if you want.
Yeah, well, here's the question I have, and you're good. You're good with numbers. I never was good at geology, so you start doing angles and stuff, and I'm out. But if a duck hunter really tried, do you have any idea how many days a Nebraska duck hunter can actually hunt by switching? Because that's the nice thing is you don't have to get on your duck stamp. You don't have to say I'm just hunting zone 3 this year or zone 2. You can go from zone to zone to zone. And I mean, so you'd be able to, our first one starts, I think, at the end of September, already open.
The first weekend in October, zone 2, but youth season's that weekend prior there. And so we essentially kind of have 3 duck openers. Zone 3 and zone 4 open the same weekend this year.
Okay.
But we got zone 1 and zone 2 that open a different date. And so you can kind of take several different opportunities there to go hunt fresh ducks if you were going to go hunt the opener.
Because I was going to say, I know that out west, I don't remember what zone it is Youth Waterfowl Weekend for one of our later zones, later seasons, because of that late season habitat that it has. So that is interesting. You can maximize a whole bunch. I mean, you could hunt 90 days, I'm guessing.
You could do the math. I haven't done it, but the math on the other 2 openers, and kind of add that into the latest one, and you could.
Wildlife, you guys got Jeff Lust, the biomagician, that can probably figure that out, especially when you toss in teal season in there. That counts as a duck special season just for teal folks. It's already come and gone, but I mean, that's just pretty darn impressive.
Yeah, and so we have to abide by a maximum number of exposure days when hunting waterfowl, and that's 107. And so we use that full range of 107 days to hunt waterfowl here in Nebraska. So
I was going to say, I was looking through this with early teal season opening September 1st, and then on Zone 4 for duck and coot, along with Zone 3, both closing on January 7th. That's a long span right there.
It is something else, and this is why I think we have so many waterfowl hunters here in the state of Nebraska, because we've got some opportunities and we've got a lengthy season, which is kind of nice. And we've had, with that liberal framework, some liberal bag limits, which we'll get into here in just a bit. As well, as we talk about an experimental thing that Nebraska and South Dakota are working on. So let's get into what kind of zone work you're going to be doing here soon. And hunters, you're going to want to listen up, especially those that are going to chase waterfowl, because we need input.
Yeah, so we can only change our zone boundaries, our duck zone boundaries, every 5 years. And so that process is beginning here in November. And so what we're going to do is, if you've had a HIP number within the last 3 years, you should be receiving a postcard soon. And that postcard, along with other marketing channels that we utilize, is going to direct people to our website where they can print off a map of our dark use units or our duck zones, indicate any changes that they wish to see, and then they can mail that back to us. And so we're going to be accepting input until the end of November. Staff will then analyze that input, work with any hunters on possible changes. And then come January, we're going to make a preliminary proposal on zone boundaries, and then hunters will be surveyed off that again. And then sometime next spring, likely our April commission meeting, we'll make a final proposal to our commission, and they'll vote on those final zone boundaries. But they won't go into effect next fall, and so they have to go through a federal review process. And so we have to have our zones submitted to the federal government by August 1st of next year. And so we'll hopefully vote on them with our commission next spring, and then get those sent to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service by next summer for them to go into effect in fall of 2026.
But it's one of those things that's processed, takes a little bit. Want to make sure we get the right input.
Yeah.
And from our duck hunters out there and what they're seeing on the land. Because I got to assume, like all other habitats here in the state of Nebraska, things can change a little bit, or desires can change as well.
Yeah, hunter preferences can change. It's been tough the last several years. We've been in a drought, and so a lot of places that had water maybe don't have water right now. But it's really important that hunters stay engaged in this process and work with us on this. Like I said, we only get to do this every 5 years. This is kind of your one opportunity here before we have to wait it out again.
There you go.
And so obviously if hunters have any questions, they can reach out to us, and we look forward to working with them.
So they'll get a postcard, and then it'll be an online.
Yeah, so then they can go to our website at outdoornebraska.gov, and you can search waterfowl rezoning. And there you'll see a website with a video with instructional material, along with 2 maps that they could print off and send back to us if they wish to see any change. When we survey hunters in January, based off preliminary changes, that will be more of a formal survey, electronic survey that hunters can fill out and indicate whether they agree with the proposed changes or not.
Oh, wow. There you go, folks. Speak your passions. We want input on this when you get the opportunity to it. That's how it all works the best, and we want to, again, maximize opportunity. Yeah. Well, that's pretty cool. I got to assume you just love this part of the job, all the survey work and the figuring out the zones and all this and that, because oftentimes the zones have to make them usable. We can't cut across the back 40. We've got to use roads and
there's
highways.
There's guidelines. For example, we used to be able to, but here recently we haven't been able to use like county lines, for example, that might just be cutting through someone's field. Yeah, it's got to be an identifiable boundary. And so roads, they have allowed us to use railroad tracks in the past.
Oh, okay.
But roads are preferred. And so that's why you see some of our boundaries where we had to get creative with it to be able to follow a road to go back and connect to another road, because we just can't cut a line through somebody's field or whatnot. So
yeah, we're trying to avoid the confusion on the hunter side out there in the field, and then any law enforcement issues that might pop up saying, well, Farmer Joe, were you on the west side of your back 40 or the east side? Because that changes. That one is still open. The other one closed 2 weeks ago. So it really can change things up. So hats off to you guys. I know it's quite the undertaking, and we're going to want to get it right. And like you said, we don't get another crack at this for another 5 years.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and one of the reasons for that is the service is always concerned about how we're distributing harvest at a flyaway level and then national level. And so if you were constantly tweaking your duck zones every single year, that fit certain habitats, that could be increasing harvest across all species or certain species, and you don't really get a time to analyze that to see if there was. Okay. And so they're taking more of a conservative approach of, we'll analyze and see if we've seen any spikes in harvest over the last 5 years, and if we haven't.
What's that term called when you do that as a politician and you redraw your district line so that you get more
gerrymandering?
People? Okay, all right. All right.
We don't do that with the ducks.
No, we don't do that. We're trying to avoid that. Yep. So that's pretty good. Folks, we're talking with John McKinney, our Waterfowl Program Manager here in the state of Nebraska. And I wanted to toss this up. Sooner or later, we're going to get this. I swear we're going to get this sign right here. Folks, we are brought to you by the sportsmen and women and recreational shooters here in the state of Nebraska and beyond through the Wildlife Restoration Fund. I'm putting this in here so that Patty can see this so we can charge this to federal grants. All right. Because I think we're all funded by federal grants in here.
Yep.
Shooting ranges, shooting sports, waterfowl hunting, game species, in kind of a mix. So this is cool stuff. Before I switch gears, is there anything else you want to talk about with the zoning? Because I want to get in this T2.
Nothing. I don't think I'd add. Just if hunters have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. We're going to keep our website updated. Again, you can go to outdoornebraska.gov and search waterfowl rezoning, and you'll see the webpage there with additional information.
Good stuff. All right. Before we switch gears, real quick. So, as we talked about ahead of pushing the record button on this, folks, Rachel, you and I had Chinese yesterday for lunch.
We did,
and I had more Chinese today. I'm not ashamed to say, but
leftovers.
Yeah, it was leftovers.
Okay.
Yeah, they were really good. I've got one of those. It's almost generic Chinese Zodiac placemats. Mm-hmm. Seeing that. Now, how many times have you guys gone into a restaurant, Chinese restaurant, we'll say, because I don't see this at many of the Mexican spots. But what Zodiac sign are you? Right now, we are in the Year of the Dragon, and we noticed that this placemat, which was, could have been used as far back as 1936, actually ends in 2024. So they're going to have to get a new one. We might see a different version of it finally, but they're pretty standard. I mean, just about everywhere you go that has these, it's the same. And John, you don't have to give us your birth date necessarily, but do you know what sign you are?
I have no clue. I know a lot of people are into that stuff, and I've never been one to keep up with it. I was born in March, though, if that helps choose my sign.
We need a year.
Okay.
We need a year.
96.
March 96. We're not going to give you your birth date, but March 96. Hold on. 96. I think I graduated college in 96. All right, here we go. And keep in mind, this, folks, right here is the placemat talking, not me.
Okay. Uh-oh, it must be bad then.
Well, I don't know if it's bad, but you are a rat.
Uh-oh.
You are a rat. 1936, 48, 60, 72, 84, 96, 2008, and 2020. Uh-oh. You're lumped in with 2020. You are ambitious yet honest, prone to spend freely. Does that sound right?
I'd say no, I don't think so. No.
Well, someone thinks you do. Seldom make lasting friendships. Oh, boy. Most compatible with dragons and monkeys, least compatible with horses. I don't even know what that means. I'd stick to golf carts then. What are you?
Tiger.
You're tiger. Tiger people are aggressive, courageous, candid, and sensitive. Look to the horse and dog for happiness. Beware the monkey.
Well, it still
Is
have to be.
that hit
They
it?
keep mentioning the monkey. What's the monkey here?
I don't know.
The monkey is
But that's Aaron.
very intelligent. Nope, not me. Able to influence people. Know some folks that are like that. Enthusiastic achiever, you are easily discouraged and confused. And it basically says avoid everybody else. But no, I think, where am I? I'm a tiger also. 74. All right, now that we've got that out of the way, that's
that up.
That's kind of fun.
That was extremely scientific.
Yeah. So this has got, I think there's 13 different signs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Is that right? Yep, 12. Just like I said, 12. How many different duck species migrate through the great state of Nebraska? We've got this, I believe this was from the Central Waterfowl. No, this is from the Department of the Interior, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Ducks at a distance.
Yeah.
I think we probably stole this out of your office before you took the job.
Yeah, there's
there's-
a lot of older ones. That's a pretty famous one there, ducks at a distance.
Yeah, folks, I don't know if you can still get that on Amazon or not, but this is pretty cool. The Central Flyway actually puts one out as well,
Yeah.
duck identification. This is something that we've talked about for many years. It's kind of cool. It's got the pretty pictures right there with all the colors in it. It's got the wings, the speculums, which you can use to identify it. Do you recall, I think I've got a book, and they've actually made a poster of it where you could identify them by bill sizes and colors and that type of stuff. Got to have the duck in hand to do that, though,
Yep.
and not many that are flying south for the winter during hunting season are going to let stop and let you do that. But duck ID, it's been something we've often talked about, often kind of tried to figure out how to make it, easier or helpful to hunters, both new and those that have been doing it for a few years. Because, darn it, it's kind of important to know your ducks.
Yeah, obviously with the way our bag limit and waterfowl regulations work, you have to know your ducks before you pull the trigger, or at least that was the original train of thought.
Under right now, the liberal framework of our waterfowl season that we're going to be hunting under this year, you can traditionally harvest 6 ducks, right?
You can harvest 6 ducks, and there's species and sex restrictions, and so
that's what I always got to go back into the book for, is what that entails. 6 ducks. Do you know it off the top of your head?
Yeah, it's so 5 of which can be mallards, but of those 5, no more than 2 can be hens. Then 3 wood ducks, 1 scop, 2 redheads, 1 pintail, at least for this year as we're recording, and then 2 canvasbacks.
There you go. And
But
sometimes
again,
that changes.
Yeah, but again, your total bag limit can only be 6.
So you could have 2 redheads, 1 scalp, 1 pintail, 2 canvasbacks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Or you can have how many teal?
You could shoot 6 teal if you want.
6 teal. How many widgeon?
You could shoot 6. So if they're not listed in that restriction there, in theory you could shoot 6. But a lot of those other species, unless you got a spot where you've got a bunch of them on it, it'd probably be pretty hard to shoot 6.
Now, my brother hunted with a buddy of mine one time in the prairies and plains and open areas of North Dakota, and they had a heck of a gray duck, which in that parlance was both gadwall and widgeon flying by. And my brother finally came back to me and said, "Aaron, how many gadwall can we actually shoot in our bag limit?" And it was still liberal at that time too. It was just like 6. He's like, "Son of a gun!"
Yeah.
Doug had me convinced we could only shoot 2 of those. So we shot 2 gadwalls, and we let all these other gray ducks come and go. And then we saw some widgeon, and we got one of those. And just like, no, just because it's not listed doesn't mean that you can't shoot them when it comes to a duck, right? I mean, those that are ducks that aren't listed at 6 is what it can be.
But what I will say, too, is on your bag limits and then the number of days you're allowed to hunt, which we mentioned earlier, can change by flyway, too. So, what we're talking about here is a central flyway. It can vary from other flyways.
How many mergansers, hooded mergansers can you take in one?
You could shoot 6.
6, common?
Yep.
How many eiders?
In our flyway, we don't have it listed, so in theory you could shoot 6, but shooting 6 eiders here in the central flyway, or at least in Nebraska, would probably be pretty dang tough. But
how many, and I had this question recently, how many ducks can you shoot that are hybrid between a drake and pintail drake?
you could shoot 6, but
6.
yeah, good luck trying to find 6, I guess.
Yeah.
If it's, that's kind of more of a complex question. I don't know, but
Yeah.
whether it's truly a hybrid or not, If it looks more like a pintail, then I would defer to only shooting one.
So what we're going to talk about here, folks, I actually did a presentation or two on myself, which is pretty cool. An experimental season going on here in Nebraska and South Dakota within the Central Flyway. And one of the things that I did is duck ID can be tough. It can be challenging at time, even for those that have a lot of practice at it. And if you've never practiced at it before, I didn't know what a teal was until I shot one. To be quite honest with you, with my Uncle Mike, we had ducks came in. We knew they were ducks. I knew they were ducks. The two guys I was hunting with probably knew exactly what they were, but all I heard when I saw ducks and they said, take them, guess what I was doing at 13 years old? I was bringing the shotgun up. And when I walked out, just like, oh, this is a cool little duck, but it's not a mallard.
Yeah.
And just like, what is this, Uncle Mike? And he told me it was a green-winged teal. Been one of my favorite ducks ever since. We were sitting around the water cooler, and you've heard this before, Rachel. Myself, a couple others that used to work here, Jackson Ellis, who's a big waterfowl hunter, Jeff Rollinson, who is pretty much a goose hunting purist nowadays. But 16 different species of ducks that we came up with that migrate through Nebraska or could occur in Nebraska. And we didn't hit any of the mergansers. We didn't hit any of those incidentals, the bigger water diving ducks, for example. I don't think we even hit goldeneye, which are not uncommon here in the state, but we didn't hit any of those, like you said, the eiders and the long-tailed ducks or anything like that, or the whistling ducks that we sometimes see in the spring. And 16 ducks is a lot to know, because for some of them, you don't just have to know what species it is. Like you said, with the hen mallard, you got to know whether it's a hen or not.
Yeah, you got to know the sex too. And so there's been some more recent research that's looked at kind of barriers into waterfowl hunting, and waterfowl ID is consistently listed as one of the main barriers for people who are not participating in waterfowl hunting. So,
and how many times have you seen a duck, even in hand, misidentified?
Yeah, and if we're being honest, I think a lot of people pull the trigger and then go see what they shot after it hits the ground, and so.
I would say a ringneck hen or a scalp hen and almost gadwall hen, pintail hen are in there as well, are some of the most commonly misidentified ducks, because it's kind of like we know from the pictures, boy, ducks are supposed to be bright and shiny and all that. The drakes are. The hens are always camouflaged, and especially when you get into those diving duck species, and there's some spots here in Nebraska that we get more than others. We're mostly a puddle duck state, but we get a lot of what I'd call blackjacks, which are the ringneck ducks. It gets a little tougher.
Yeah, and being a mid-latitude state where we have an opportunity to hunt earlier in the season, even the drakes will have that kind of brown drag color. And so when you're hunting earlier in the season like this, it can be super tough to identify, a juvenile, let's say drake mallard versus a hen or whatnot. And so you got a lot of brown ducks coming through, which makes it tough.
It does. I think I was talking recently, this was a few years into my duck hunting career, we were under a very limited, probably restricted, 30 days, 3 ducks. We had to start shooting about sunrise instead of 30 minutes before like we do now. And we had a wet year, and fortunately the mallards were loving that, but we'd shoot a duck, and then we'd go out, grab it, and look at the bill and say, all right, this is a hen. We can't shoot any more hens. We got to look for that olive green color, because they were in full eclipse in early October where we were hunting. And hopefully we'd see that yellowish green color at that time of the year for the males. Like, all right, we're good. But it was kind of intimidating, to say the least.
Yeah, it definitely can be tough, for especially a state like Nebraska, and then a state like we're going to talk a little bit about South Dakota too. So
well, let's get into there, because we are 3 years in, right? Or is this the 4th year?
So we're heading into our 4th year. So
you're looking at the guide, and you gotta.
No, I'm just absorbing.
And it's one of the cool things of all the different types of ducks we have. That's part of the allure to me of duck hunting, is the different species and never knowing what you might see.
Yep.
They have some cute little names like bufflehead.
Oh, and they're a neat little duck. They really are, and they are little, especially with their pink little feet, those drakes. But there are some cool ones, and I've harvested a few in not Nebraska, but in surrounding states that aren't listed in that guide at all. Some were escapees and all that type of stuff. But anyway, Nebraska and South Dakota realized, hey, this could be an issue, because how many years ago, for the longest time, duck populations, if they went up, hunter numbers went up basically. Yep. As they came down, all right, makes sense. fewer people going out to chase them. But then all of a sudden the duck numbers population started going up and the duck hunter numbers didn't.
Yeah, they declined for a bit and they kind of steadied off. But if you look just here in Nebraska, we've lost about 52% of our duck hunters since the late 1990s. And so we've halved our duck hunter population here. And obviously that has major ramifications for the way conservation's funded. That's fewer people buying duck stamps, which 98% of every duck stamp goes back into wetland acquisition or restoration. It's fewer funds going towards PR dollars, like the sign you held up there a little bit. That's less people buying shotgun shells and other hunting.
And let's also preface the fact that some people are like, well, that just means less competition. Not really, because I don't know that impacts or demand for public hunting areas has lessened any, but it definitely has softened the voice of those people taking part in this activity. Because you got there's power in numbers, right? If there's more people doing this, they take more interest in it. We're gonna help support that. But as things kind of go down, not that an agency like Nebraska Game and Parks by any means, but just overall, where some of that funding is coming from or support for the spending of some of those dollars.
Yeah, Nebraska and South Dakota is not unique in that duck hunters have been declining across the nation of late, and so. With that, obviously we're losing revenue. If you look at the way conservation's funded, a lot of it's off permit sales and money we get back through PR dollars. But we're also losing that sense of culture and heritage, which is so prominent in many parts of the U.S., including Nebraska, like we discussed earlier. And so while that's harder to quantify, that's obviously a really important component of this as well.
Yeah, it is. So several years back, and this was almost a decade in the works from the idea to when we actually got to start it, was the idea, all right, let's help hunters out with identification and simpler regulations.
Yeah. And so the idea of the two-tier system is broken down into two tiers. So when you go and register for HIP, which is required if you're going to hunt migratory birds in the U.S., here in Nebraska, when you get your HIP number, you get to pick your bag limit. And so Tier 1's a traditional bag limit, which is 6 ducks per day with the species and sex restrictions that we mentioned earlier. Tier 2 is the 3 ducks per day with no species or sex restrictions. And
3 ducks. You got to identify them as ducks.
And so the whole idea of this is, could we increase R3 recruitment, retention, and reactivation through just simplifying our regulations without having an adverse effect on waterfowl populations? And so we can get into a little bit about what we've seen thus far. But, a lot of people, like you mentioned when you went hunting earlier, especially waterfowl ID is a barrier for people entering waterfowl hunting. Research has shown that. And a lot of times we don't get that full experience of what it's like to identify a waterfowl unless we're out hunting. And so it's a big difference in going to your city park and looking at a mallard from when or at least I know it was for me, when you're standing in a wetland with a shotgun in your hand. It's just breaking daylight. You got ducks flying all around you, and you have to identify them. And so for new hunters, that can make them pretty anxious and be overwhelming.
And I don't want to put words in everybody's mouth. I can't speak for all hunters by any means, but I'd say a good majority of us don't want to make a mistake. We don't want to threaten the resource. We don't want to do something that's illegal or unethical. And that kind of weighs on the back of our mind too. I don't want to mess up.
Yep. Yeah, and this provides you an opportunity to get out there, experience waterfowl hunting, try to learn your ducks while out in the field, and be able to waterfowl ID the ducks that are coming in without possibly violating bag restrictions that are associated with a traditional duck bag, and then having a run-in, with a conservation officer or something.
Exactly. Because like you said, then we get to identify them in hand, and which is a little bit easier, but still mistakes are made. I've seen it personally where canvasback hens were misidentified as redhead hens, which was a completely different bag limit. But it does take some stress off the situation and tries to allow them to get out there, have some opportunities, as long as it doesn't hurt the resource, right? Yeah. Because some of those ducks, they've got restrictions on them for a reason.
Yeah. And so that's one thing we're monitoring throughout this through different surveys. We're sending out kind of 3 different surveys, and then we followed it up with some phone interviews as well. So.
Which is pretty cool. And we've got some time to get into this just a little bit. We're going to have to bring you back to talk about this more, because you've got a pretty interesting job to say the least. And this one here, got started, like you said, that we're going to our 4th year, so
it's
22?
21 to 22.
21.
Yep, I believe. And so we're going into our 4th year. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service granted us a 5th year to write the final report and submit that to them. So after this season concludes, we'll analyze all the data we have thus far and then submit that report to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service.
And I know there was a lot of concern, and it's one of those things that we're cognizant and want to hear from folks that are out there duck hunting all the time. Again, for some, it's darn near, I don't hardly miss a day. But on average here in Nebraska, about how many days? Do you know what they hunt in the Central Flyway?
For Nebraska, looking at some of the harvest diary data we have for Tier 1 hunters, traditional hunters, yeah, it's about 6 days per year.
6 days.
Yep.
Now, I know there's some listeners out there thinking, that's the first week type thing, but that always kind of shocks me. A lot of things that where you find out about hunters and sometimes our recreational shooters is they don't do it as avidly as we might think, or what we talk about, or the guys and gals we hear from that are doing it. They built the pit, they're leasing the ground, they're doing whatever. A lot of them are just kind of like, yeah, I'll go. Does it work this weekend? No, maybe next. Oh, season's over type thing. So it's not a lot. And with the Tier 2, the ones that are doing the 3 ducks, no species or sex restrictions, is it the same or is it a little bit less?
Yeah, so we're sending out a parts collection survey and also a harvest diary survey. And so the parts collection survey gives us an idea of species-specific harvest, so we can monitor and see what ducks people are harvesting. But the harvest diary survey allows hunters to indicate when they're going hunting and how many ducks that they harvest. And so from our harvest diary survey, we can see that Tier 2 hunters here in Nebraska are only going about 4 days throughout the entire season.
So a little bit less.
Yeah. And they're harvesting about 2 birds per season, and their ducks per bag is about 2 as well from the harvest diary results.
2 ducks, not per hunt, but 2 ducks per season.
Yep.
So we're not talking about a huge number of ducks being harvested total.
Yep.
But, here in Nebraska, are those species of concern, pintail, scaup, canvasback, are they having a huge impact on those?
No, not at all. And so that's one thing. There's still a lot we have to learn from this, and there's still some analyses that's going to take place. But as far as targeting waterfowl species of concern, that has really not been an issue in Nebraska or South Dakota. We have had a couple people submit some extra pintail wings and 1 extra scaup wing since we've been doing this.
1 extra.
Yeah, but we can pretty much say that at least for states like Nebraska and South Dakota, this is not a program that's going to have an effect on waterfowl populations.
And I think it comes down to something that makes sense once you start thinking about it is, what's the most common type of duck you're going to run across? The most common type of duck, right?
Yep.
Mallards, probably teal during certain time of the year, maybe gadwalls, shovelers, that type of stuff. And some of those, they're rare, they're less common, so you're just going to encounter them less.
Yep. And so through our parts collection survey, we had hunters submitted a little bit more wings, 3 to 4 wings per season, but again, still under 5 wings are harvested throughout the season. But the majority of the birds harvested by the hunters were blue-winged teal and mallards. We did have some more green-wing shot last year, but it's mainly teal and mallards. And that's the same as South Dakota as well.
That's always kind of interesting. It's one of those things that makes sense. Now, like you said, Nebraska and South Dakota, we have some things in common. They probably a little bit more nesting state, being in the prairie pothole region, and they fly through. Come through there a little quicker. But there's other states in the flyway that overwinter a whole bunch of pintails or scaup or something along those lines that might not be possibility there, or possibility with restrictions. I don't know. That's yet to be determined. But that is interesting. So if we're not having an impact in these 2 states on those species of concern, and we're opening up, I mean, what are we talking about? This is one thing that I always thought was kind of cool, folks, is at the very first year, we were thinking, if we're lucky, this new experimental season, we'll get about 500 people trying it out. 500. So they ordered, I believe Matt Garrett ordered 500 envelopes for the, like you said, the journal and the wing collection and all that type of stuff. And how many did we have that first year?
Yeah, so the first year we had over 3,200 individuals register.
3,200.
Yep.
And that's when I've used sometimes. They told us they like simpler regulations. They told us that duck ID was an issue. And we're shocked that when we made it simpler and helped them with the ID challenge, they responded even more than what we thought. But one of the cool things too is we thought this was a recruitment. New hunters, they're going to be the ones having trouble. And even that first year we saw something like that, but also a new twist.
Yeah, I think it surprised many people as this might actually be a tool for reactivation as well. We had a lot of individuals indicate on their surveys or reaching out to us via phone that they haven't hunted in a while. They may have been older, and they were worried about violating the bag restrictions associated with the traditional bag limit, and they just haven't hunted in a while. And so this provided them an opportunity to get out and go hunting. I had one individual who really wanted to hunt with his grandkids, who were younger and quicker off the gun, the way he put it. But he still wanted to go out and hunt with them, and he said his vision wasn't as good as it used to be, and this allowed him the opportunity to go out. He obviously purchased a duck stamp and his permits. He was able to try to mentor, I'm sure, his grandkids there, but just spend some time with them in the wetlands. So,
and that's something I've heard from some of the mentors. Something I hadn't given full thought to either was, if you're the one that everyone's relying on to identify whether we can take this next flock that's coming into the decoys, there's a little pressure there.
Yep.
My Uncle Mike, like I said, he was the one that helped identify ducks that first hunt and for several hunts. I've hunted with some biologists. I've hunted with some ornithologists. I've hunted with people that know ducks. But they've also been that point where I'm the one expected to know, is this widgeon or gadwall coming in? Are these diver ducks? Or are these, all sorts of different things. And the only way you're going to get that figured out, the flight patterns, the way they bunch together, the groups, whatever, how they're flying high, low, wing beats, all that, experience. But it still is kind of intimidating. I've seen some of the best make mistakes at the last moment, especially like you said, all of a sudden they appear, they curve in, like, yeah, okay, type thing. And so I've heard some of the mentors say, just like you said, took a little bit of the, I know they're a duck. We're golden there. So as long as we don't drop 3. And that's the other thing too that I think is unique. It kind of cuts their bag opportunities in half. It's not like they get to shoot the same number of ducks and all that. They're already hunting less. They had to make that consideration, but they're willing to do it.
Yeah. And, we look at how many bags a hunter gets and how many birds per bag. And so, that kind of gives us an idea is tier 2 hunters, are they being constrained in their harvest with only a 3 bird bag, but they're actually not. So if you look average, I think it's around 2 birds per bag is what the hunter harvested, just under 2 birds per bag. And so it's not like they're going out there and filling up their bag when they are shooting ducks as well. But, even though they're harvesting fewer than 5 ducks per season and going out fewer than 5 days per season, this is still providing them an opportunity to get out in a wetland and try waterfowl hunting. Mm-hmm. And some of our postseason work has indicated that a lot of people are new that are choosing this. So
there you go. That's pretty cool. And I know we're going to we're kind of coming to our end here. I appreciate for those folks still watching and listening to us. I go back to bird watching. And bird watching now is how many $1 billion industry right now? Imagine if we had to tell people you can't start putting that bird feeder up and feeding birds until you know exactly what species are going to be out there that you're going to see. And there'd be a lot less bird watchers, a lot less people putting up those feeding stations in the backyard and figuring out. No, they put it out, then they started seeing birds, and then all of a sudden, I want to know what those birds are. So they get out the little ID book and they're like, well, I know that's not a robin. I know that's not a blue jay. What is? Oh, it's a grosbeak. Oh, that's cool. And then all of a sudden they start realizing, I do different things. I can attract different birds, and they really get into it. And that's how that industry has been built. Duck hunting, a little different, obviously, but at the same token, there's a lot of folks that don't have the luxury of having a John McKinney there in the blind with them to tell them, all right, here we go. These are hatch year bluebills coming in here. Get ready. We can only shoot how many of them? How many we got? Okay, all right, take them. That type of thing. And so I'm sure there's some traditionally trial and error. We just didn't really know about it or talk about it. Here, now we get to try it, and you don't have to worry so much about the air side.
Yeah. And, through some of our postseason results from this, we're seeing that, a lot of the hunters that are choosing this are new, and we'll be able to find out more on that at the end when we do some of our final analyses. But over 90% of the users that have chose it support the program and say that it did help them with waterfowl ID and become more comfortable duck hunting. So,
and it's an opportunity, folks. If this is something you don't want to do, you want the 6 ducks and you feel confident in your duck ID, still there.
Yep.
I mean, that's the awesome thing. I like the ability to have options.
Yep.
All right, with deer hunting, I can decide: am I going to use an antlered tag, or am I going to use a Season's Choice antlerless only tag? What am I out there for? What do I want to get out of the experience? That's pretty cool, because we all have different reasons out there. Well, John, thanks for being in here. Appreciate it. We're going to have to get you back to talk a little bit more about this. This goes fast. Folks, I know by the time you hear this, we might also have had John McKinney on the Nebraska Outdoors Thursday night radio show, which you can find online and downloadable, or at least listenable to. I don't know if that's downloadable at KFORnow.com, but make sure you give us a big thumbs up, a subscribe, whatever you need to do so you know when the next one of these makes it to the airwaves, whether video or audio. But until next time, we'll see you outdoors.
Hunt Nebraska, brought to you by your Nebraska Game and Parks Commission.